where am I? And you said, hey, where am I? Find the nearest gas station. So you're registering with Cortana. Cortana's always listening, presumably. Or once you tell Cortana to listen, and you say, where am I? Where is the nearest gas station? So the where am I part of that, you would have registered with your app to say, hey Cortana, whenever you hear, where am I? The next bit of speech should be targeted to my app. Don't go to Bing first. Don't go to any or look anywhere else. I should be the priority. I know how to handle this, and include me in your results. So that voice is a noisy channel, right? Because Cortana has to decipher what is like a preparatory command, right? What's that kind of hint, and then what's the actual argument that's being passed in. So this is very similar in that sense, where we're dealing with this noisy channel, and we want to have an interpreter. So that's kind of the relation between this in a game and where you might see it like in the real world. KCP says, I see, but the big if-else part will be obsolete with this library. But I see your point. Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely want to start with our algorithms being, I don't want to say messy, but our first pass is definitely like a thinking pass. And we definitely want to see what the best fit is. So is it the adapter? Is it the interpreter? There's definitely places to refactor here. And I think that's going to be the fun part. The fun part is seeing how do we turn the scripty stuff, because the scripty stuff, which is all these if-elses, which is super dirty, how do we turn the scripty stuff into nice, concise algorithms that follow these solid principles and these single responsibility principles and are fun to maintain. This, once you get to like 20 or 30 commands in your game, is not going to be fun to maintain. We've done that in other places. We'll probably hit those in a second, where we've really collapsed down some large algorithms or process statements into things that are a little nicer to use. Okay, so one more time. Alright, so I did a look Carl, and Carl is a monster, and he doesn't have anything set up for his description. And let's go take a look at why that is. So looking at the base game object, we had decided last time that everything in the game, because everything extends off the base game object, or at the very least inherits from iGameObject as a contract, which is an important distinction to make here in OOP. If you've got both of these things, you're a little bit better off than just having one. Some people might say, hey, you've got a base game object, isn't iGameObject redundant? And it could be, depending on your usage, but for us, iGameObject is our absolute lowest common denominator. It allows us to extend or write other abstractions that obey iGameObject, but may not need all of the weight that comes with the base game object. I think a great example of that is our inventory items. Items are these very, very light things. They're probably going to need a lot of the complexity that we're going to bake into our other game objects. But we still want them to follow the same contract, because that allows us to use them inside of our Flyweight pattern, for example. And we do that initially, and then we kind of reap the benefits for the rest of our coding. So the base game object, we've got a description, and then that just returns get description with no setter. So in a very Java kind of way, because Java doesn't have these auto properties. So to do this in Java, you'd have to write a get and set method for your field. So you kind of borrow from that in this sense, where you say, hey, only thing description is going to do, this handle is going to fire off get description. And this is where we put in some base or default functionality. So we make this virtual, meaning that you can override it if you want. Otherwise, all you'll get is there's nothing to see here. So if we go into our monsters, we go into our base monster, and now we see this is already very different than our actor, because base monsters don't really do anything crazy. They're pretty dumb as far as interactions are concerned. And there's a couple things we haven't implemented. And so you'll see that description isn't here because it's relying on something else further down the line. In this case, the base game object to satisfy that. And it's not going to appear here because we chose not to implement it. Let's go into zombie. And we could specialize here inside of the zombie class with the description. So it'd be something very, very particular to the zombie. Or we could do it here in the base monster. But I think, let's try to do it in the zombie. And so you'll see this is ReSharper again, giving me the list of overrides that are available to me. If you look at the inheritance, we're in the zombie class, we're going off base monster, and our inheritance allows us maybe to get ourselves into trouble because we have the ability to override execute, we have the ability to override all of these things. So you have to show some discipline in terms of what makes the most sense to override where. Okay, so I'm not really doing anything here. So it's giving me this little redundant method override. And once again, a lot of these little hints are coming from ReSharper. If I'm really selling ReSharper as being this really nice code hinter. Cassiopeia asks, could you explain why you make the method getDescription virtual instead of the property description? Sure. So it's just it's a coding style choice. And if I go back over to base game object. So I can give a description of body, and if I did this, and I did this, and I said return nothing to see here. So Cassiopeia's mention is that this is effectively the same thing, and then in all my calling layers, I could be overriding description as opposed to the method. So I don't do that as a style choice because I want my properties to be their own kind of API. I want them to do as little as possible. And in some ways, I want them to be a control of sorts. So I don't want them to do much heavy lifting, but I also want to have the option of, at a very, very base level, dictating their structure and access. So I guess structure and access is really all I care about. For any kind of nitty-gritty stuff, I prefer to see that someplace else. But to your point, if I did make that virtual and do it this way, it would achieve the exact same thing. So you just have to decide for yourself what your style is going to be, and then just be consistent to it. And a lot of times those styles just come into preference. I think this is one of those times. Okay. So yeah. So when I glance, and I'm really big in my personal software process. I'm really big about gaining as much information as possible at a glance. And so when I glance at my properties, I like them to be very, very simple. And I assume that all my complexity is going to come someplace else in the class later on with the implementations. So, yeah. Hey, you're welcome, Cassiopeia. It's a good question, absolutely. Challenge, challenge, challenge. That's how we all learn. And there's going to be times in my own, between parts of my personal software process that are stale. I was looking at a write-up for some bit of .NET. Someone asked me a question about it, and I said, "Oh, here's a really great article about it." And I went and showed it to them. And at the very top on MSDN was a banner that says, "This article is deprecated." And I was like, "Well, how can that be deprecated? That's my current understanding." And I looked at the date, and it was years ago. So I was carrying around this unchallenged concept for 3, 4, 5 years, and it was in my closet, and I never came back and evaluated it. And you don't evaluate those things until somebody challenges it or you challenge it, which is another reason why these code cutters and such are really good. Shine the flashlight on things and see if you've just been carrying around some really old ideas that shouldn't be implemented anymore. Okay, end of rant. So get description. So for my zombie, I want to say the zombie is a husk which moves with some effort. While it appears easy to defeat, I'm not a writer. Let's be clear about that. Okay. So, the zombie is a husk which moves with some effort. While it appears easy to defeat, its blood-soaked hands and mouth give you pause. Boop, 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 boop. Alright, so let's play around Cassiopeia's question a little bit and see. Let's really give it the acid test. So inside of my player, I'm showing the hit points here in the get description. Which is fine. But if I wanted hit points to appear, or health to appear for anything that you looked at, and that's not necessarily true. Alright, we'll come back to it. Let's do it twice. Trying to figure out a way, like, how did I want these descriptions to compose themselves? I was trying to think for a second how I wanted them to compose themselves, because with the description, I definitely want to have a description and then maybe the hit points every time, but not for all things, right? Like, maybe I don't want to see hit points for a pot. But, you know what? Let's just do it and we'll tackle